G'day and welcome back to A Kiwi's Perspective. Today we're going to be covering the recent controversy that has plagued the Far North District Council and has blown up all over social media regarding unelected iwi and hapu representatives taking over committees and enforcing voting rights to those who are unelected by ratepayers. It is another step towards the co-governance model that has been slowly taking hold across New Zealand over the last decade. And this will definitely not be the last attempt that is made at a local level to install levels of control by an increasingly more powerful oligarchy so that they can make decisions without being worried of being held to account by those that it impacts directly. So I've put together a couple clips today to really give you guys an idea of not just what's been going on in the far north, but also how this has spread across the country. And if you're unaware of the steps being taken under the co-governance and the justification of a partnership instead of sovereignty from the Crown, this should be the beginning of a deep dive for you, and I highly recommend you check out all the links for all of these different interviews that I have used for these clips, and to continue exploring, particularly in the regions that you live. As if you are unaware of what's going on, it is very hard to fight back against it, and they are making it very hard, as we will see further into these videos. So let's jump right in, shall we?
Okay, Davina Smolders wrote to me over Christmas, wanted to meet up to tell me her story. She says she stood for council, and she's only been there, 6 months, on a pretty simple premise: focus on core services, use common sense, protect private property rights, and keep decision-making accountable to the people who actually vote. Then she got elected, right? She got sworn in, assigned to committees, standard sort of stuff. One of them looked promising. It was a mix of councillors and the mayor, all with voting rights. Fair enough, she thought. This is how representative democracy is supposed to work. Then the room kept filling up. An iwi representative, good, local voice matters, she thought. Then 3 hapu representatives, then more, and more. And by the time everyone sat down, there were 21 seats at the table. 6 were elected councillors, 15 were unelected representatives in the room, all with votes. Now let that sink in for a bit, all with votes. This isn't some advisory group. This is a committee where real decisions are shaped, decisions that carry through to full council.
Well,
So, as we saw there, we are eroding the ratepayers' voices within local government. And this is not the only examples we'll see further down the line, but I want that to be absolutely clear to everybody watching, that unelected should mean no vote. They're not representing anybody who voted them in, except for their own interests. An oligarchy that is being built off the back of compassion. And we'll get into that a little bit more further down the line.
well, it's the mayor that's facilitated this at the Far North District Council. So under the Resource Management Act, you have the Mana
Whenua?
Mokahone I Rohi agreement,
What's that?
which means that council must have discussions with local iwi. And in our one, he's added in extra clauses where we have extra layers of rules, policies, bylaws, exemptions, you name it, it's in there. And through that, he can have unelected members sitting on our committees, making decisions that are now shaping the Far North District Council's direction.
This is worse than co-governance, because co-governance at least has a structure, and at least that you know something's going on. You know, it's all written down and everything. This here is just ad hoc. This is whatever the mayor decides, and
It's not co-governance; it's governance.
I was going to say this is a takeover.
Now she's.
So before we let David Seymour speak, which the reason why we're going to get the Deputy Prime Minister's feed back into what's going on is that is one of his candidates for local council, Davina stood for ACT and was elected in. And I think it's laid out plain and simply quite in that clip that this is no longer about cooperation, it's about control. And control of the people in any circumstance that is not provided by an election, by the people themselves, is power that needs to be pushed back against, regardless of its intentions. We'll break down a little bit more when we see how the NZ Herald covered this story. But at the end of the day, what we are seeing are the erosion of the voices that pay and sustain the powers that be, which are currently taking over and excluding them from conversation. Even if all 6 elected council members within that committee voted against the 15 unelected, it would still pass as they're not the majority. But anyway, let's see what good old Seymour has to say, shall we?
Facing a meeting on Wednesday where a whole lot of people have advertised that the sovereign power of Maori is being challenged again by systemic racism. That's a flyer that's gone out with a whole lot of people basically doing a kapa haka performance. And what they're proposing is a mass haka outside the council chambers when it meets on Wednesday. You just unpack that for a moment. First of all, our sovereign power. Well, I'm sorry, but the Parliament and the Crown are sovereign in New Zealand, not a group of people who stand outside and try to intimidate you, is being challenged. Well, it's not being challenged. There's just a council that's elected making democratic decisions. And finally, by systemic racism, well, there's no racism here other than some people getting put in decision-making positions because of their heritage, rather than being elected by free people at the ballot box. So we've got a huge problem in the Far North District Council. The Minister for Local Government has taken the first step at the urging of Davina Smulders, and now 2 other councillors who have joined her. But this is a test for New Zealand.
So I'm going to have to agree with Seymour there. This is a test for New Zealand. What we're seeing is how far they can push the line. What we're seeing is how much they can get away with to continue to propel control across the population. And when I say they, I don't mean Māori. These people do not represent the view of all Māori. And we know that because the tip of the spear is Te Māori Party when it comes to these views, particularly when you look back at them breaking their MP oaths and putting in paperwork to try create their own parliament to have a separate law for Māori. And at the current polls, they're not going to be getting back into parliament. This is not something that the majority supports. And we'll dive more into those votes and how different groups support who further into this video. But that needs to be made absolutely clear that this is not Pākehā versus Māori. This is oligarchy versus the people. This is a totalitarianism authority that can implement its will without consultation of those it impacts and those who are paying and live under the people that rule over them. that needs to be made absolutely clear. And I wish that David would speak more to that. But that's all right. We're not all perfect, right? Let's see what else he has to say as the Deputy Prime Minister regarding this issue.
Allegation is 21 iwi, unelected, sitting in on council committees and having an influence on decisions. They have no mandate to do that, surely, unless the mayor, which the allegation is aiding and abetting this up there. That would, sort of in any normal person's mind, seem to trigger some kind of government action, wouldn't it?
Well, they appear to be inventing a new form of local government, which is half elected and half unelected. If the elected half enter into it, then you're kind of stuck with it. They've done something they have no right to do, which is throwing away the democratic right of the people to vote out governments or councils they dislike. And I just want to quote you from the Labor Party's constitution, a sentence that I strongly believe in. It says, quote, all political authority comes from the people by democratic means, including universal suffrage, regular and free elections with a secret ballot. We're now seeing political authority that comes from ancestry. And it's so simple. You either believe in those very good words in the Labor Party constitution or you don't. It seems the ACT Party is having to pick up the baton that the Labor Party actually proudly carried, 100 years ago, but they carried it.
So, just to dive in a little bit more into what David Seymour was saying before we have a look at the official response from the Mayor of the Far North District Council. It is written in Labour's constitution that this type of behaviour is unacceptable. And I know that David's against this. I know that Winston Peters and NZ First are also against this. I would say National are too, but considering their voting record and their inability to enforce the belief, it makes me suspicious of whether they actually are against this or not. Because the reality is that this type of system benefits those that are in power. If you only have to consult with the representatives that are on these committees and in the government, instead of having to appeal to the people, you can push through your agenda far easier, far quicker, with less resources. You can avoid accountability for the decisions being made. So, in saying that, if Winston and David decided to walk in to Christopher Luxon's office and pretty much say, mate, we're both on the same page here and you should be too. This is an easy win for your polls. It will make it look like that you are genuinely taking control of the situation. And we need to force a vote now in Parliament to amend legislation to fight back against the erosion of the voices of the ratepayers within local councils. What that would look like exactly, I'm not 100% sure. We'll see a little bit more details into the video, but I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than just one or two lines. But I'm pretty damn sure that if they want to make it happen, they will. And once again, this could be a very easy win for National, which they need right now. I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with the polls, but let's just say it isn't looking pretty for Blues. And I think it's also a very smart political move of David Seymour to use Labour's constitution as to why it is wrong. Potentially, we will get Chris Hipkins' response to everything going on. As far as I'm aware, he's been silent on the matter, as he is most things. But putting them on the spot, and if you force a vote within Parliament, it would be interesting to see how Labour responds, and if they vote against stopping this type of governance within local councils, who knows? That might swing the polls back towards National's direction. Particularly if those who don't support the erosion of their voices see that Labour will not back them, despite the public overwhelmingly being against this sort of governance from an unelected oligarchy that is slowly taking over our processes as a democracy. All right, now let's have a look and see how the NZ Herald has been covering this ongoing issue.
I say to those that want to try and detract or to put focus on us on whether or not the instruments that we're implementing in here to include Māori at the Far North District Council are right or wrong, that argument and that debate needs to go to central government who have legislated that it's absolutely fine and we are carrying on with our mahi. We've got a huge road ahead of us. The heat or the voices that have or haven't been represented, that's a conversation for the community to have. My focus right now, as I've already stated, is about getting on with our mahi ahead for us here. We, of course, as the council, are not hiding anything. We, of course, as the council, are a public service agency, and so we have ways for the community to engage, to be consulted with on the mahi that we want to put on the agenda for the people of the Far North, and that's where that appropriate conversation can be had with us. We've got a reform storm coming our way with proposed changes around how this very entity is going to operate, not just for the next 3 years, but for the next generation. But as the Mayor of the Far North, all I can say is that I stand by the values of this council: integrity, professionalism and manaakitanga, and I'll leave it at that. Kia ora.
So, very interesting. I am going to break down his response, but before we break down his non-response, let's have a look at what his official response was when Duncan Garner reached out. So for those who aren't fully aware of the context, this story broke on Duncan Garner's show when the councillor became a whistleblower during an interview. And as you can see here, this is just from one of his social medias that I'll be posting down in the links so you can see the original post. And as you can see here, we have a pretty reasonable email being sent. I have Davina on my podcast last night, and given her claims, I thought best to offer you a slot today to reply. Are you free today for 10 minutes for an interview? Cheers, Duncan Garner. Which is, I think that's very much a due diligence, and it shows good faith that he's trying to get all sides before he starts crucifying people on a show, to put it nicely. And as we can see here, the response that he got was F off. So that was the initial response from the mayor. That is a very telling response, and it's a far more brutal response than the one we just saw from the New Zealand Herald. And I think it's far more telling than what was actually said in his official response currently. I think that it was a nothing burger, really. It is a shift of blame, that because the central government hasn't legislated against what we're doing, therefore what we're doing is okay, and removes his accountability for the decisions being made. There obviously is a rule book, but some rules I would think don't need to be written down. I would think one of them would be decisions made that impact ratepayers are made by the people who the ratepayers vote in. I thought that would just be something 101, but clearly that is something that the Far North District Council disagrees with. And to just try sideshift that blame is a very telling, along with the response he gave from Duncan Garner, that actually he can't really justify what's going on to his ratepayers. So now they're trying to paint it up in a PR stunt of inclusion, which we'll break down a little bit more further into these clips that I've put together. But one last thing I'd like to say is that he also gave us a warning in that response. He specifically said that there is more legislation coming that will not just impact his term, but the generations to come. And that this is not where they're going to be stopping. And if the coalition government does not do something soon, there will be laws written down which will be far harder to get rid of, that have been put in place by a mayor against the will of the people. Because if the people aren't consulted, then they are not included, and therefore the decisions are made against them. And it's in the name of compassion and inclusion, which is the standard rhetoric used when making decisions that can't be justified in regular means, and you can't actually break down the numbers, which we're going to do a little bit more moving forward. But it's quite telling that his initial response over a week ago was to tell the podcaster to piss off, to put it nicely. And now that they've had time to get their PR together, they have a very specific angle that all of them have been pushing, which we're going to break down a little bit more as we continue through these videos. So let's keep going, eh?
It's tough that people are still asking us to justify our value and our aroha and our cuteness all the time. Yeah. But I'm really happy with the results and move on.
Move on. No more questions here. I'm happy with how it's going. This is what we want. That's that. It's annoying that people ask, why are you even asking? That's not your job. As ratepayers, as people concerned from the public, go away. If you care, you need to agree. If you don't agree, then you clearly don't care. Love how it's just that sidestep to push you away. No real answer once again. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's see what these others have to say.
When it comes to Māori representation, it was pretty much obsolete, with Moko actually taking in his space as the mayor and seeing a lot of our representatives on council that are Māori and even non-Māori, but working together to, I suppose, create a space that is inclusive, has brought a lot of our Māori whānau out, and we can see that just with the elections that have gone through. We've seen more participation from Māori, more participation from hapu, and even with iwi. And that's always a positive, considering that Māori have always said that we're not represented in these spaces. And I can say honestly now that our communities are not being neglected, and not at least by local governance. Maybe by central, but not by local governance.
So, I just wanted to bring up some basic stats that you could search up on your own in your own time. And just to kind of push back a little bit on what was being said there, the lack of representation, and that's quite funny coming from the Far North District Council. But let's talk on a central level first. We've got roughly 27% of the current caucus in Parliament being Māori. So, which is, depending on estimates, some people say, 15, 16, some people say up to 19, 20% of the population is Māori. That's clearly over. Based on those numbers alone, there's an over-representation of Māori within Parliament. And not only that, it's the highest in history. I do understand it's a split between the opposition and the coalition, but that's the reality. The reality is that there is participation and representation through MMP. It might not be some of the representation you like. I understand that people like Winston Peters are considered the wrong kind of Māori, but you can't argue with the statistics. And as we can see for the Far North District Council, once again, I just wanted to see from the election before to see where we were at, because these claims are based at what's happening now is seeing this inclusion and finally bringing more Māori in. And I don't know about you, but the numbers that I see here, 40% of the 10 councillor positions directly Māori voices, only being able to be voted in by Māori. Once again, country-wise, that's quite a lot. I know the proportions are different in the Far North, but the reality is that there is inclusion. there have been steps already taken, and some people would argue that the Māori wards are step too far. But I just wanted to make that point, that actually inclusion is already here. What we're seeing is a far bigger step forward. Some would say a leap. Anyway, let's keep going, eh? There's more that the NZ Herald wanted to say, so let's keep going.
The increased voting of the Māori people across Northland came about because Māori are now feeling part of the institution that is local government. We really need to bring more light to the situation and less heat. What I mean by that is that we have to talk with each other and not past each other, because I've listened to the rhetoric on social media and elsewhere. It's not good for Northland, and it's not good for our country.
It's definitely not good for our country. I'll agree.
For our country.
I will agree with you on that. What's been taking place is not very good for democracy. I find it quite interesting, the framing that's being used here, that what we're seeing is just more people participating, and we should be happy about that. And now that they feel included, more Māori are going to be speaking, and more Māori are going to be involved within the process of local council. And that's a good thing, and that's all we should be saying, and nothing else matters. It doesn't matter that these unelected officials are not going to be held to account by the right players. That doesn't matter. Clearly it doesn't matter. And calling for us to work together, as in the ratepayers and the unelected, now that the unelected are in a position of control, is a quite interesting timing. Like, we're happy now, let's just move forward, forget about it, it's happened, and now I want to see us work together instead of speak across each other and just argue. Funny how that's now the mindset, because there are more votes in your favour instead of the traditional democratic process, which not only give Māori opportunities to be within local council anyway, because that's how the election system works, so it was already there, but also has wards within these councils that push the iwi and hapu's voices directly into the process. It's just quite interesting framing. Anyway, so I thought this map would be interesting for you guys to have a look at. It is the 2025 New Zealand local referendums on Māori wards and constituencies. And these are the areas that had votes. And what we can see here is the out of all the different councils, it's been pretty clear how the public are feeling regarding Māori wards. This is democracy in action. Those who wanted to keep Māori wards, fair enough, you got your vote. But we also see the anti-ward vote and how many different councils fully rejected it. And I think this is important. And this is just from 2025. If we keep going, we also have this here, which has some votes that have been tallied since 2003, and how over time the public has been overwhelmingly against Māori wards, which is quite an interesting fact to take into consideration when trying to figure out how local councils should be enacting these voices. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if it stopped at consultation, that no one would even be worried. The reality is that if those who vote are held to account by the ratepayers who vote for them, then no one's going to have a problem. But what we're seeing here is the opposite of that. That we have unelected officials who are now directly impacting ratepayers and with no way of accountability to those who are directly impacted. And that's what we're seeing now. So I thought this would just be interesting to how all the links are going to be in the description with all these different assets. So I recommend diving into these in your own time. It's quite an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Anyway, let's keep going.
Civics, in my experience, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about how things work. That misunderstanding has caused some friction, I think. Being more trying to be heard, and in some cases fighting to be heard, and that has really changed. People are coming to hui, people are reading agendas, people are making submissions, people are realising their own power within the system and being heard. It's absolutely a positive change. This is Te Tai Tokerau, this is the Far North. All of the people should have a place to be heard. Local government has so much influence on our lives, so it's a place for everybody, and previously tangata whenua have been largely left out. It's been a lot more difficult, and Māori wards and our kahika moko have created a space for much more inclusion. I don't think that's something to be fearful of. I think there's unfounded fear of inclusion and of listening and working together. I think that's a good thing.
So once again, inclusion. The framing is being placed this way because if you are looking at this from any other angle other than how you feel, it just screams wrong. The inclusion of people in the process already exists through democratic means. We have gone a step further for Māori through Māori wards, and what we're now seeing is councils being directly impacted by unelected officials that you can't hold account. That is what we're seeing now, and they have to frame it that way. They have to, it's compassion, it's inclusion. There's nothing to be scared of, I promise. Trust the words coming out of my mouth. Ignore the gut feeling of people making decisions about your lives and not being voted in. Just ignore it. This is a good thing. We want more people involved. This gets them involved. Because you totally couldn't walk down to the ballot box and vote. Oh wait, you could. You've been able to do that for a while. That's quite strange, isn't it? Once you start asking critical questions, their arguments fall apart. And that's why, through that entire clip, you didn't hear one question from the Herald. Not even one. Not even the, ooh, that was quite a harsh response, mate, to Duncan Garner. Or those who were concerned regarding the impact on the council's process. Just nothing. And even here, right at the end, the Herald approached at Councillor Davina Smulders for comment. She said she was unavailable as she was involved in a council committee meeting. So is that just convenient timing from the NZ Herald that they asked her when she was already doing something? Is that their way to scapegoat having the opinion that would contradict everything else that has been said before it? That is quite alarming. They didn't even do an email response. They didn't do a little bit of research on what she's posted on her social media or where she's done interviews somewhere else to get quotes. None of that. They presented no pushback because the reality is as soon as you start pushing back, it collapses. Anyway, let's keep going, eh? I've got some more opinions to come through that help shed light on what's going on, not just
co-governance, mate. Co-governance. I mean,
idea,
it's
isn't
alive
it?
and well in
It's a really good idea, isn't it?
I know you're a big fan. Yeah.
Well, it could be solved very easily. The government could just look at that 2002 Local Government Act. I think it's Section 31. In fact, the ACT Party put out a press release on this today. The big problem is Section 31 of the Local Government Act, Schedule 7, quote, the members of a committee or subcommittee may, but need not be, elected members of the local authority. Now, You change that to the members of a committee or subcommittee must be elected members of the local authority. Problem solved. Problem solved with the mark of a pen.
Go into urgency and force Labor to vote against it.
So there we go. That is the rebuttal that the mayor was referring to. That actually it's allowed, so therefore we're going to do it. And if there's a problem, then the central government needs to sort it out. And to be fair, they do need to sort it out. Nobody here is concerned about race. It has everything to do with accountability and the democratic process that makes a country free in the first place. And it's quite scary that that is the way it's being framed within what I would consider the traditional media spaces. And those who support these steps being made, is that it's the compassionate thing to do for more people to be involved. And this is the right of Māori to have, even though they're not even speaking for all Māori. It's quite alarming. Anyway, let's keep digging in, eh? There's a little bit more to say.
If we changed that, as you say, change that little clause, and we made it has to be elected members, there could still theoretically one day be 100% Māori members on that committee because they were voted in, and that would be democracy. It's not actually about race. It is about whether they are elected or not.
Correct.
So,
that's exactly right.
If we have a council that is entirely Māori or entirely Chinese New Zealander or whatever, because we voted them there, then hey, that's democracy. And I think we should be fine with that. But the problem here is that all over the country, we're hearing about these situations where it is primarily an iwi thing, but there are some situations of other types of non-elected people where the people have voted who they voted for on the council, and it is what it is. And some of them voted against Māori wards as well, which adds another kind of additional factor of, well, why are you kind of doing them by proxy? And so really, the issue is that if you have a non-elected person on the board, especially if you have multiple, there is no way to hold them to account for when they screw it up.
Yep.
So the whole premise of democracy really is that we vote these people in, they have a set time period in which they make decisions, and if they bugger it up or do something to annoy us, we can vote them out at the end of the term. With these guys, they can stay on the committee as non-elected members for as long as they like, and there's absolutely no mechanism for us to say we don't like what you're doing. It's not fair, or it's a stupid.
And up north, there's 21 of them sitting on some of these committees, or 6 elected, and they have their Māori ward ones as well, plus the 21 unelected iwi that sit in on some of these committees. Now, Davina Smolder's Pete's spoken out about this, and now faces this mass haka in front of council headquarters tomorrow, saying that she's trying to take away their sovereignty. What sovereignty? How's your co?
Especially concerning. Because those arguing against this are not being racist, but those who are arguing for it are claiming that the opposition are. We're in a space now where if you say no, you will be labelled. And if the labelling doesn't work, then there'll be threats. If you go watch the full interview with with Davina, you will find out that she has had 13 threats of violence and death that have had to be investigated by the police since she's been in office, because she's been pushing back against the steps being taken. And now they are organising intimidation to be taking place during her meetings to get what they want. That is a very scary position to be in. It reminds me of when David Seymour put up his treaty bills, the perception of how the treaty should be perceived within law, when he put that up into government to read out for its first reading, And not only did they do a haka, which is, may I remind you, a performative dance intended to invoke intimidation and to scare the people that you're dancing towards, but then they also used handgun symbols to project towards David Seymour, to intimidate. And that is not democracy. It never has been, and it never will be. It's very scary that we are seeing this take place at local level. And as of now, the current government has not done anything about it. So what we're going to be diving into now is a couple more examples of co-governance spreading out throughout the country, and how this is not just impacting the far north, and how if we are not on our toes, that this is going to continue to erode the democratic process and impact not just us, but our children. And the more entrenched it gets, the harder it will be. And you can't even be mad at them, because as of now, they're allowed to do it in current law. With no ratified constitution that secures our rights and liberties, they can be made malleable to those in power. And we are seeing the creation of an oligarchy that can influence, dictate, and control our day-to-day lives, all the way down to where we fish and what we can say online. And if you think that's an overstretch, I highly recommend digging in to some of the choices made in not only the councils that we're going to be covering through the rest of these clips, but also within your own councils, because I guarantee there's something to find. They make it very hard to find on purpose. So get digging. The more you know, the easier it is to fight back. So let's keep going, eh?
Governance looking? Well, it came to a 4 last Thursday, I guess. I got voted down 13-2. It was only 2 councillors that voted against the co-governance. I mean, I'll give you a little background. So we've got a shared water entity across Hastings, Napier and Central Hawke's Bay. Yep. And currently water services, which is like your sewage and water, are governed by the elected councillors, right? Full accountability. But this proposal goes beyond the consultation and hands decision-making power to unelected individuals. So now we have a board of 9. 3 will be elected councillors, 3 so-called experts, and 3 mana whenua, which essentially means, local Maori.
Local iwi.
Yeah, well, it's the entity will have the power to rate and charge the public directly. Yet only 1/3 of the decision makers will be elected. So how do you account to ratepayers? Because they're funding it, and we lose control.
You've just democracy is pushed to one side. Then you've got 3 people who are elected, 6 who aren't. I suppose you do need experts. What do the iwi bring?
Well, we've got experts as council officers, right? Surely that will change. They will move over to the new entity. So the experts will already be there employed. Their role is to be the experts. Governors are there to govern, not to be experts. We're not supposed to be experts. We're just to be standing up for the people.
And so your concern is not just with the iwi, but with the other 3.
It's nothing to do with iwi or Maori. It's to do with the unelected officials running the show.
Yeah,
it's
ridiculous.
Iwi. Co-governance.
And so who designed this? Who designed it?
Well, I guess the mayor and the 3 mayors got together and came up with it from the 3 councils, I guess, and the CEOs would have pushed it.
So there we go. Another example from Hawke's Bay of more steps being taken to create this unelected oligarchy backed by bureaucracy to make decisions on behalf of those who don't have a say. I also found it quite interesting that it's also coming from the mayors in Hawke's Bay that are making these decisions go through. It's alarming, to say the least. But that's just another example. It's 3 waters all over again. And that was part of the reason why Labour lost the last election, was over 3 waters. The public have made it clear. And as far as I'm aware, in Hawke's Bay, all the Māori wards got voted to be removed. but yet these decisions are being made anyway. Quite interesting stuff, really. Let's have a look at some more examples.
Taupo District Council, like many, many other councils around the country, has a joint management agreement with the local iwi Ngāti Tūwhariatoa. It's well known it was signed in 2009 after almost a year of public negotiations and hapu meetings. So it was all out in public. So what was discussed and agreed to was all in the public arena and people could have their say. The 2009 agreement is extensive and effectively explains what's important to the iwi and gives them powers to agree or disagree with planning and resource consents in their tribal area. And they sit alongside council representatives on these committees, which are powerful and influential. It's the very embodiment of what you call co-governance, but the agreement is being upgraded and all the work between the council and the iwi to date to change this and to upgrade it has been done in private and in secret and without any public input whatsoever. The public's been kept right out of it until today. That's because the council says it doesn't meet the threshold for consultation under the council's significance and engagement policy, despite the fact it's likely to introduce provisions that go well beyond the scope of the original 2009 agreement. So potentially controversial matters are being discussed and agreed to between council and the iwi without the voting public's knowledge or agreement. Do you smell a rat? I suppose the council says, oh, it's there on behalf of the Crown and it's there on behalf of ratepayers. But ratepayers are in the dark. And the council justifies this by saying they already operate informally like this with Ngāti Tūwhariatoa. If that's the case, then that's outrageous and anti-democratic, isn't it? It means major decisions have been and are being shaped without the public's knowledge, without their agreement or say-so, and without consultation. The entire thing lacks sunlight. Where's the bloody transparency?
And that is another example. We are seeing agreements being made across the country that are moving the goalpost and excluding ratepayers from the decisions being made. We're being told to not worry about it. It's no stress. You don't need to be concerned. That's why we don't include you in the conversation. That's why it's not public until we force through the agreement anyway. And that's what we're seeing. It's quite scary. And that clip was from 9 months ago, I believe. As I said, all of these links are going to be in the description. I recommend you watch all of these videos. And I recommend that you go dive in deeper. I know it's a lot of Duncan Garner. But the reality is that he's one of the few people that's actually been covering this vigorously. And that should concern you. It should concern you that ratepayers being excluded from decisions are not all over the front page. But anyway, we just got a couple more and then we'll wrap up.
Loader is with the Public Land Users Group in the Waikato. He's been tracking what's going on between the regional council and the local iwi, and they're really struggling to find things out. They've been shut out of discussions, and when this happens, honestly, democracy looks broken when this happens. So what's going on in the Waikato? What's at stake, Andy? G'day, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
What's happening in the Waikato? Because we've seen what's happening in Taupo with this agreement between iwi and the council. It's been developed behind closed doors and in secret, lots of concern. It's happening in your way, up Waikato too.
Exactly the same thing. It's they're talking about setting up a Waiora committee, which is going to control the water, and it's being done behind closed doors, and nobody really knows what's happening, to be honest. Nobody's saying anything. It's beyond belief.
So you're part of the Public Land Users Group. So who's involved in your group? When did you guys set up? What did you guys stand for?
Primary Land Users Group. We were originally set up in the beginning with PC1, Plan Change 1, under the Waikato Regional Council, under the Waikato Regional Plan, in opposition to that. And that was passed and put into place by the casting vote of the chairman at the time, or chairperson at the time. She voted in favour of putting it forward, and it's been 10 years since it was brought up. It's been through the courts. It's just they put out the interim decision the other day. So that's where we came about as a voice of the primary land users in New Zealand and within the Waikato region.
So you got farmers and miners and all sorts of people there, did you?
Farmers, miners, dairy farmers, sheep, beef farmers, you name it. I mean, they're all there. Commercial vegetable growers.
Yep.
The whole spectrum.
And so what's going on? So it looks to me like in the Waikato, the regional council are negotiating with iwi to extend their powers or whatever. But you guys can't find out any information about what the iwi demands are and what's going on behind closed doors.
No, well, this is the problem. All of it is being carried out behind closed doors. It's public exclusion, and that to me is like it's almost like a totalitarian state.
So that is just another example from the Waikato. As I said, all of these links are going to be in the description for you to dive into in your own time. And pretty much from my understanding, the premise of all of these decisions being made is that the treaty has now been defined as a partnership between the Crown and iwi, which, funny enough, leaves everybody else in the dark. It is quite concerning that these steps have been made with no consultation to the public, despite numerous historical accounts showing that those that were involved with creating the treaty were aware of what was taking place, how there were Māori leaders involved up until the day before where they read out the drafts in English and Māori, and there were bilingual Māori there and involved. It is quite stagnant to me that this is being used to create two separate societies within New Zealand. And this never works. It never works in the long run. It only benefits those in power. We are seeing an oligarchy being produced under our noses that is consuming the control at local level and are trying to produce control at central government level. We've already seen these steps take place over time. However, they're getting very egregious. And so far it's been working. If I was Prime Minister, this would be one of my absolute top priorities to get this sorted out. You can't have groups of people within a nation believing they have their own separate rights and they have their own sovereignty that is exclusive to everybody else. Being a New Zealander should mean something. It should mean something to the people who are living here. And as of now, ratepayers are just being taken for a ride. And definitions are being changed willy-nilly to suit the current agenda. Ultimately, this is due to the lack of a ratified constitution in our law, which does not define the parameters of government and those who operate within it, and does not define and protect the rights and liberties that are granted to its citizens. When we don't have these defined outlines, we have those who try to manipulate and take control. And you can't even be mad at these unelected officials who are getting these top job paid positions. The system lets them do it. They're going to take advantage of every opportunity they get, as most people would. And what scares me is that not only is this not on the front page of every single news provider, but that the current coalition government with two minor parties who have campaigned against co-governance directly, and National, who was given a mandate by the people to remove and gut this out of the process to make sure that we have one law that covers across all of its citizens, are not only doing nothing, but are helping it continue. To be fair, it was National who signed a lot of these settlements that have opened the doors to what's taking place at the moment. And to be quite honest, if it's up to Labour or National, I think that they would let this continue. As I said previously, it is far easier to exert your will on a select few who are unaccountable to the people, instead of having to stand up every 3 years and convince those who vote that your way is the right way. It is quite scary, the trajectory that New Zealand is on, and that's why I think it's important that everybody understands what's taking place and that you're paying for it. Your tax dollars are going towards what's taking place right now. And this is beyond reparations. This is beyond inclusion, and it's beyond compassion. It is about control. It's about manipulation. It's about forcing the outcomes that the so-called academics and those in power want to see happen. And the fact that we haven't seen this stopped in its tracks scares me, that it might already be too late. And that those who have the ability to do something about it either don't have the will to do so or are unable to. It is what it is for now. I hope that this video has sparked some thinking in your brains. I would love to hear what other people would have to say regarding this topic. It's considered quite controversial, so I expect to see some comments down below on potentially things I may not have the correct context for. But from what I can see, we have an oligarchy that is continuing to build momentum, and one day we won't be able to stop, at least not through policies. I hope New Zealanders one day figure out that we need a ratified constitution before it's too late. Thank you very much for your time. If you liked the video, please show the support. Like, follow, subscribe. There will be a new video out next Sunday, and there will also be my shorts coming out throughout the week. And if you have any suggestions for topics for us to cover, please let me know below. And I hope to see you next time on aKiwisProspective.